I first noticed her on a Tuesday. Not because she did anything noticeable, she was just there, leaning against the counter at the corner cafe, reading something on her phone. But there was something about the way she read, thumb paused mid-scroll, like she wasn't really seeing the words. The place was almost empty. Just the low hum of the espresso machine and the faint chatter of two students behind me. I came here most afternoons after class, mostly because it was quiet, partly because it smelled like ground coffee and rain-soaked wood. And partly because she was here. I didn't even know her name back then. Just that she always ordered the same thing, black coffee, no sugar, and always sat by the window facing the street. She had this way of folding her receipt into tiny squares, neat little edges, until it disappeared into nothing. I'd pretend not to notice, but my eyes kept drifting anyway. That day, I got my usual cappuccino and sat 2 tables away from her, close enough to see her reflection in the glass. She wore a soft blue blouse, sleeves rolled to her elbows, and her hair, dark, loosely tied, kept slipping forward until she brushed it back again. I was 22, broke, and, if I'm being honest, a little lost. Classes felt pointless. My roommates were loud. My phone was full of unsent texts I'd written at night and deleted in the morning. There was this constant static in my head, except when I came here. Except when she was around. She looked up once and caught me staring. Not long, just half a second, but it was enough to make me look down fast, pretending to read a message that didn't exist. When I glanced back, she was smiling faintly, as if she'd caught me but didn't mind. I don't know why, but I smiled back. A few minutes later, the barista called out her order, and as she stood to leave, she passed by my table. "You always get the cappuccino," she said softly, like it was an observation, not a question. I blinked up at her, caught off guard. "And you always fold your receipts," I said before I could stop myself. That made her laugh, quiet, like something she hadn't planned to give away. She hesitated, then said, "I guess we're both predictable," and walked toward the door, coffee in hand. Her voice lingered long after she left. I don't know what I expected after that, but the next few days felt heavier, like waiting for something I didn't even have a name for. I kept going back to the cafe, trying not to make it obvious, but she wasn't there. Not Wednesday. Not Thursday. Not even Friday. By Saturday, I told myself to stop thinking about it. She was probably just some stranger I'd seen twice. That's all. But then, late that night, just as I was about to sleep, my phone buzzed. An unknown number. "Hi. It's Elena. From the cafe." The predictable one. I stared at the screen for a long time, heartbeat louder than it should have been. She shouldn't have had my number. I realized then that I'd scribbled it on the back of a receipt weeks ago and left it near the tip jar without thinking. I typed and deleted 3 different replies. My fingers hovered over the keyboard. I didn't know what to say. Finally, I sent, "Hi." I put the phone down. Picked it up again. Stared at the typing bubble that appeared, then disappeared. And then nothing. Just silence, the kind that presses in on you, heavy and unfinished. I didn't hear from her again for 3 days after that first text. 3 long days of checking my phone too often, pretending I wasn't. Of scrolling back to her message like maybe I'd misread it. By the 4th day, I told myself to stop thinking about her. She was probably just being polite. Just a stranger. And then, on the 5th day, she was at the cafe again. Same window seat. Same black coffee. She looked up as I walked in, and for a second, I thought she wouldn't acknowledge me. But then she smiled, small, cautious, and lifted her cup like a quiet hello. I sat across from her without asking, which surprised both of us. "You ignored me," I said before I could stop myself. Her brows lifted slightly. "I didn't ignore you," she said, stirring her coffee. I hesitated. I wanted to ask why, but something in her tone told me not to push. Instead, I nodded like I understood. For a while, we didn't talk. The hum of the espresso machine filled the silence between us. She kept folding and unfolding the sleeve of her coffee cup, while I traced circles on the table with my thumb. Finally, she said, I used to come here with my husband. Her voice was steady, almost casual, but her fingers didn't stop moving. He hated the coffee, but he liked the windows. I didn't know what to say, so I said nothing. Just listened. We split 2 years ago, she added after a beat. It's quieter now. There it was, a small truth, something personal she hadn't needed to give me, and yet she had. I wanted to say something back, something equally honest, but my throat felt tight. So I settled for, I'm sorry. She smiled faintly. Don't be. It wasn't tragic. Just slow. I caught myself staring at the way her fingers rested around the coffee cup, relaxed now, and quickly looked away. I should have left then. Should have kept things simple. But instead, I stayed. We talked about small things, her work, my classes, a book she'd been reading but hadn't finished. At one point, she leaned across the table to show me a passage on her phone, and her hand brushed mine. Just barely. But it was enough. It wasn't the touch itself, it was the pause that followed, both of us pretending not to notice, pretending it hadn't changed something. And yet, it had. After a moment, she withdrew her hand, sipped her coffee, and said lightly, You're too young to drink this much caffeine. I smiled, grateful for the escape. You sound like my mother. She laughed, soft and quiet, shaking her head. God, don't say that. I don't know why that moment stayed with me, maybe because it felt like someone finally saw me. When she left, she didn't say goodbye. Just a glance, a lingering half-smile. But somehow, it felt louder than words. After that afternoon, things shifted, not in any obvious way, but I felt it. The air between us had changed. We didn't text. Not once. But 3 days later, I found myself at the cafe again, same time, same table. And she was there. This time, she didn't smile when I walked in. Just lowered her gaze to the rim of her coffee, fingertips tracing the paper sleeve. Something about her was closed off. Hi, I said softly, sliding into the seat across from her. She hesitated before meeting my eyes. You shouldn't sit here. I froze. Why? Her gaze flicked past my shoulder. I turned slightly and saw a woman, maybe late 30s, watching us from the counter. Dark hair, sharp expression, whispering something to the barista. My friend, Elena murmured. She comes here sometimes. I nodded slowly, pretending it didn't matter, but my chest felt tighter than it should have. So? So, she said, lowering her voice, people talk. We let the silence stretch after that. The kind that hums. Cups clinked. Someone laughed near the door. She kept her head down, stirring a coffee that had already gone cold. I should have left. I knew I should have. Instead, I leaned forward, elbows resting on the table. Does it bother you? If they talk? Her hand stilled on the spoon. It should, she said finally. But, she stopped, biting her lip, like the rest of the sentence was too dangerous to let out. I didn't press. I couldn't. She stood abruptly, sliding her chair back. Walk with me? We stepped outside into the late afternoon heat, sunlight spilling across the street in heavy stripes. I shoved my hands into my pockets, watching her from the corner of my eye as we walked. You don't seem okay, I said quietly. She smiled without looking at me. I'm fine. But the way she twisted her wedding band, an old habit, maybe, though the ring was gone, said otherwise. We stopped at the edge of the crosswalk. Cars rushed by, wind lifting strands of her hair across her face. She didn't move to brush them away. I wanted to. Elena, I started, but the name stuck in my throat. She glanced at me, eyes soft but unreadable. You should go, she whispered. I shook my head slightly. I don't want to. Something passed between us then, too quick to name, too heavy to ignore. My heart felt louder than the traffic, louder than everything. For a second, we just stood there. Her hand hung close to mine, close enough that I could feel the heat of her skin. I thought she might reach for me. Or maybe I imagined it. Then the light changed, car stopped, and she stepped forward, just out of reach. "See you around," she said, barely above a whisper. And I let her go. But the almost touch burned all the way home. It was raining the night she called me. Not heavy, just that soft, steady kind that turns streetlights into blurred halos. I was halfway through an assignment I didn't care about when her name lit up my screen. I hesitated before answering. "Hey," I said, trying to sound casual, but my voice came out quieter than I meant. "Are you busy?" she asked. No greeting, no small talk. No, I paused. "Do you want to meet?" She didn't reply right away, but I heard her breathing through the line, soft, uneven. "Finally, there's a park near my place." 15 minutes? I grabbed my jacket and left without thinking. When I got there, she was sitting on a damp wooden bench beneath an old street lamp. A half-empty thermos sat next to her, steam curling into the cool air. She didn't look up when I approached, just ran her thumb along the rim of the cup like she was memorizing its shape. "You okay?" I asked, sitting beside her, keeping a careful distance. She shook her head. "I thought I was," she whispered, but then today, she stopped, chewing at her lower lip, eyes fixed on the wet pavement. I waited. "Someone from work saw us," she said finally. "At the cafe. She asked if you were my son's friend." Her laugh was short, humorless. I didn't know what to say. I glanced at her, but her face was turned away, hiding whatever she didn't want me to read. "Elena," I didn't answer, she cut in. I just smiled. Like it didn't matter. But it does. I exhaled slowly, feeling the tension coil tighter between us. "Does it matter because of them?" I asked softly. "Or because of me?" That made her look at me. Really look. Her eyes were tired but sharp, like she was weighing something heavy she couldn't set down. For a long time, she didn't speak, and in that silence, I could hear the rain hitting the leaves, the distant rumble of a passing car. "I'm scared," she said finally, barely audible. "Of me?" I asked, and my voice cracked on the last word. Her gaze softened instantly, but she didn't reach for me. "No," she whispered. "Of myself." Neither of us moved. My hand rested against the bench, just inches from hers. The space between us felt louder than anything we'd said. I wanted to tell her everything, how I thought about her at night, how her silence followed me home, how nothing felt right when she wasn't around. But I swallowed it all. Instead, I said, "I keep thinking about that day at the cafe." She tilted her head slightly. "Which part?" "The part," I murmured, "where you almost touched my hand." Her lips parted, but no words came. The rain softened to a drizzle. The street lamp buzzed faintly above us. Her hand shifted, just slightly, toward mine. And then she whispered, "Tell me what you want." I opened my mouth, but stopped. Because I wasn't sure if I wanted her to ask again. After that night in the park, something changed. Not between us exactly, not at first, but around us. The air felt different. Thicker somehow. Every text, every glance, every silence carried more weight than it should have. I expected to see her at the cafe the next day. She didn't show up. Or the day after that. Nothing. By the fourth day, I stopped pretending I wasn't waiting. I left my apartment early, walked past her street just in case, slowed down near the windows where her lights usually glowed at night. Nothing. I told myself she was busy. That work had caught up with her. That maybe she was visiting family. But the truth settled heavy in my stomach, she was avoiding me. By the end of the week, I couldn't take it anymore. I texted her. "Hey. You okay?" No reply. I deleted the second message before sending it. And the third. Saturday night, I finally gave in and went to the cafe, hoping she might be there. She wasn't. But as I turned to leave, I caught sight of her outside, standing across the street, talking to a man I didn't recognize. Older than me. Early 50s, maybe. He touched her arm as he spoke, and she didn't move away. Something in me tightened, sharp and sudden. I told myself I didn't have the right to feel anything. That she owed me nothing. But it didn't stop the knot in my chest. I almost walked over. Almost. But then she laughed at something he said, soft, quick, the kind of laugh I'd only heard once before, that day at the cafe when I teased her about folding receipts. I left without saying a word. 2 days later, she finally texted. "I'm sorry." Just that. I stared at the screen, waiting for more. An explanation. A reason. Anything. But nothing else came. I typed back a dozen versions of "for what," and deleted every one of them. I didn't reply. I started skipping the cafe. Stayed on campus longer. Buried myself in assignments I didn't care about, just to keep from thinking. But the silence followed me anyway, into my apartment, into my nights. And then, one evening, I walked past her street again. Her curtains were open just enough to see shadows moving inside. A figure. 2 figures. I stood there longer than I should have, heart pounding like I was trespassing on something private. I thought about knocking. About saying something, anything, just to break the silence that had stretched too far between us. But I didn't. I walked home instead, phone heavy in my pocket. Later that night, I drafted a message, "Do you want me to stop?" I stared at it for a long time. Then I saved it to drafts. Unsent. I didn't feel heartbroken. I felt paused. Like life forgot to finish the sentence. I didn't plan on seeing her that night. I'd been walking home late, hoodie damp from the drizzle, when I passed her street out of habit. Her porch light was on. Curtains half drawn. And then she opened the door. Elena. Her name left my mouth before I could stop it. She froze, one hand still on the doorframe, like she'd been about to leave but hadn't decided where to go. For a second, I thought she might close the door and pretend she hadn't seen me. Instead, she sighed. "You shouldn't be here." "I know," I said. I didn't plan to be. The rain tapped against the awning above us, steady and soft. Somewhere down the street, a car door slammed, muffled and distant. We stood there for what felt like forever. Finally, she stepped aside, wordless, letting me in. Her living room smelled faintly of coffee and raindamp fabric. A stack of unopened mail sat on the counter. The TV was on but muted, casting pale light against the walls. I stayed near the doorway, unsure what to do with my hands. She walked to the kitchen, poured water into a glass, and set it on the table without drinking. "You've been avoiding me," I said quietly. She didn't answer right away. Just leaned against the counter, arms crossed, looking at anything but me. "I thought it would be easier," she said finally. Her voice was low, steady, like she'd rehearsed this. "For both of us." I nodded slowly, though my chest tightened at the words. "And is it?" Her laugh was soft, dry. No, the silence after that stretched, heavy but alive. I took a step closer, careful, like the floor might give way. "Then why?" Her shoulders rose and fell in a slow breath. "Because you're 22, she whispered. "Because people talk. Because I don't know what I'm doing anymore." I swallowed hard, looking at her, really looking. The tired set of her shoulders. The faint smudge beneath her eyes. The way her hand trembled just slightly as she reached for the glass she still hadn't touched. "Elena," I said softly. "I'm not asking for anything you don't want." For the first time that night, her gaze met mine. I couldn't read everything in it, but I saw enough, the guilt, the longing, the exhaustion of holding it all in. "You make it sound simple," she murmured. "It doesn't have to be complicated," I said, almost whispering now. Her fingers brushed the edge of the table, restless, like she needed something to anchor her. I thought about closing the space between us, about reaching for her hand, about saying the thing I'd been carrying for weeks. Instead, I just asked, "Do you want me to leave?" She stared at me for a long time, lips parted but silent. Then, finally, she shook her head. No, that was all. And somehow, it was louder than anything else she could have said. It's strange how quickly a year can fold into itself. Some mornings, I still wake before sunrise without meaning to, and for a moment, it feels like I'm back in that cafe, 2 tables away from her, pretending not to notice the way she folded receipts into perfect squares. But things are different now. I still go there sometimes. Same window seat, same 8:47 a.m. light cutting across the street. But I don't wait for her anymore, because she's already there when I arrive. Black coffee, no sugar. Always. We never had one moment where we decided. No big conversation, no agreement. It just happened in quiet ways. Evenings where she'd leave her porch light on without saying why. Text sent without thinking, tea, followed by 5 minutes. Late walks where neither of us said where we were going, we just went. It wasn't simple. It still isn't. There were weeks we barely spoke. Nights where I lay awake wondering if we'd crossed into something we couldn't hold together. Times I almost pulled away, thinking she'd be better off without me. But then she'd do something small, pour me the last cup of tea without asking, tuck her hair behind her ear when she laughed, or sit beside me on that same park bench under the street lamp, thermos in hand, saying nothing at all. And somehow, that was enough. The first time we went back to the bench after everything, she brought that old thermos again, the one from the night she asked me, "Tell me what you want." She poured the tea carefully, steam rising between us in thin ribbons. "You still take too much sugar," she teased softly. "You still fold your receipts," I said, and she laughed into the rim of her cup. The silence that followed wasn't heavy anymore. It was full. Now, our routines overlap in ways I couldn't have imagined back then. I still write unsent texts sometimes, but for different reasons. Things I don't need to say because she already knows them. And when people talk, and they do, she doesn't flinch anymore. The other day, someone at the cafe asked if I was her son's friend. Elena just smiled faintly, looked at me, and said, "No, that was all." Tonight, we're at her place again. Rain against the windows. TV muted, just the sound of her making tea in the kitchen. I watch her, the soft sway of her shoulders, the way she hums without realizing. When she sits beside me, she sets her cup down and leans back, head tilted toward mine, like it's the most natural thing in the world. We don't talk about beginnings anymore. We don't need to. Some loves don't start with fireworks. Some just stay. I glance at her thermos on the table and smile. She catches it instantly and smiles back, the kind of smile that says I know. And she does.